And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, December 16th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, when we come back, I'm thinking we're in the second segment, but we're going to start off the show by talking about the Bills and their win over the Lions and the high-scoring game that was. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about the Eagles and their win over the Steelers in the Battle of Pennsylvania. We'll also talk about Patrick Mahomes and his ankle injury that he suffered in the Chiefs' win over the Browns. We'll talk about the Packers and their win over the Seahawks. And then in the final part of the show, we will preview the two Monday night games that we have. We have the Vikings and the Bears, and the Falcons and the Raiders. Apologize if I was a little late getting on today. So I did start streaming, and then all of a sudden, my laptop disconnected from my Wi-Fi, and I was trying to reconnect it while I was still recording, but it wasn't helping me out, so I had to shut down my computer and turn it back on. So we're all good now, so I apologize for that. But anyways, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the Lions and the Bills. And remember when I said I didn't expect it to be a 44-42 game? I was wrong. Now, I was wrong in terms of it being lower scoring because there ended up being more points scored in this game than there were in the game last week when the Bills took on the Rams. And the final score of this game ended up being 48-42. Very high scoring. Like I said, more points scored in this game than the game last week that we got when the Bills ended up losing that game. And the Lions, they kind of took on the role of the Bills from last week where they were kind of playing catch-up the whole game. And they ended up losing. This was their second loss of the season. Although the Lions, did keep it close in the first half. It was 21-14 in the first half. But the Bills kind of pulled away, and they were up 38-21 at one point. Then it was 45-28 at another point. Lions ended up scoring a touchdown towards the end of the game to make it 48-42. But the Bills, they ended up recovering the onside kick, and it looked like for a moment that maybe the Lions recovered it, but ultimately the Bills did. They ended up winning the game. Now, Dan Campbell got some criticism because they went for an onside kick another time during the game. And, the game was still kind of close. There was 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And the Lions ended up going for an onside kick. Now, Matt Collins recovered it, and he looked like he was going to return it for a touchdown. He ended up getting tackled short of the goal line. But then Josh Allen immediately threw a touchdown pass to Davis, and that made it 45-28. And Dan Campbell received some heat on that because, again, there was still some time left in the game. There's plenty of time left in the game. And you gave the Bills great field position, and they scored a touchdown immediately. And these are the kind of things that have me concerned about the Lions going into the playoffs, is decisions like that, combined with, going for it on fourth down last week against the Packers at your own 30. That's going to hurt you in the playoffs if it doesn't pan out, because these better teams, and the Bills are a team that you could put in that Super Bowl tier. You can't do that against these teams because you're going to end up hurting yourself. And the Bills capitalized on it immediately, and Josh Allen scored a touchdown right after they had that big return on the onside kick. And Josh Allen, once again, was fantastic. Didn't have 6 touchdowns in this game, but I believe he had 4 total touchdowns in this game. Another solid performance from him. He had 2 rushing touchdowns and 2 passing touchdowns, and he threw for 362 yards. He's the MVP right now. And on the season, he has 25 touchdowns to 5 picks. And no turnovers in this game. And he should have had a touchdown pass. I forget who it was. I think it was to one of the tight ends, but it was like a jump shot. He just kind of it was like he was taking a jump shot and flicked it to one of the tight ends, and it got called back, I think, because of holding. But he was making plays constantly, and both defenses were banged up in this game. The Lions just continue to lose guys left and right on the defensive side of the ball. The Bills, their secondary was banged up. So, it was important that the Lions, were perfect on offense and they didn't make any mistakes. But the Bills' defense early on, they were getting to Jared Goff. They were putting pressure on him. And the Bills were going up and down the field. So, like I said, the Lions were playing catch-up. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. For the most part, I thought, the Bills did a good job. They limited the running game of the Lions. Jahmyr Gibbs actually had a big day receiving the ball. He had 83 yards receiving and a touchdown. But the Bills' defense, they held the Lions to 48 rushing yards. Now, part of that is because, again, the Lions were playing from behind pretty much the whole game. They never had a lead. But, early on, they were shutting down David Montgomery. He had 5 carries for 4 yards. This Lions rushing attack is arguably the best in the league. And the Bills, I thought, did a good job at limiting that. But through the air, Jared Goff had almost 500 yards passing. He had 494 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. He went 38 of 59. And it's kind of funny because Adam Schefter, he tweeted something about this, that the Lions, they lost a game where Jared Goff threw 5 touchdown passes, but they also won a game that he threw 5 interceptions, which is interesting to think about. But big day for the Lions pass catchers. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he had a 66-yard touchdown in this game, 14 receptions for 193 yards and a touchdown. Sam Laporta, 7 for 111. Like I said, Jahmyr Gibbs had 5 for 83 and a touchdown. Jamison Williams had a touchdown in this game, 3 for 37 and a touchdown. Tim Patrick, 4 for 30 and a touchdown. They also did have an offensive lineman score a touchdown. Dan Skipper, 1 touchdown in this game. He had 1 reception for 9 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown actually did lose a fumble in this game. No sacks of Josh Allen in this game for the Lions defense. Jake Bates missed a field goal at one point, 0 for 1 on the day. Went 6 for 6 on extra points. Tyler Bass also missed a field goal in this game as well. But Josh Allen, 23 of 34, 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. James Cook, I did say, James Cook used that ground game if you're the Bills, and they did. They ran the ball for almost 200 yards in this game. James Cook had 105 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen, 68 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Ray Davis had 15 yards. Ty Johnson, he actually ended up being their leading receiver in this game. 5 receptions for 114 yards. Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid, they were back in this game. They made a couple of big catches. Keon Coleman had 1 catch for 64 yards. Dalton Kincaid, 4 for 53. Dawson Knox, 2 for 42. He had a clutch catch in this game. Khalil Shakir had 6 for 39 and a touchdown. Bills defense, 3 sacks of Jared Goff. And Tyler Bass, like I said, 2 for 3 on field goals. He went 6 for 6 on extra points as well. And the Bills, they improve to 11-3 on the season. The Lions, they drop to 2-12. And, they got to be careful, the Lions, because, they got a few tough games down the stretch. A divisional game against the Bears. The 49ers are banged up offensively. They got their guys back on defense, but, I think the Lions should still win that game. But I think the division, the NFC North, it could come down to that last game of the season against the Vikings. Because the Vikings tonight, they play the Bears. I think they should win that, but you never know. The Bears, they played all their divisional opponents tough this year, so we'll see what happens. But the Vikings, their remaining games, they take on the Seahawks, who might have lost Geno Smith for a couple of weeks. And then they take on the Packers again at home, and then they take on the Lions. So, again, could come down to that last game of the season, which I hope it does, because that would be a very exciting Sunday Night Football matchup to end off the season. But, for the Lions, look, at some point they were going to lose. And I did say, I said last week that they were due for a loss against the Packers. They ended up winning that on a game-winning field goal. Here I thought, all right, the Bills coming off of a loss. I don't think they're going to lose 2 in a row. The Lions are due for a loss here. And that's what ended up happening. But, they got to get healthy. They got to get healthy on defense. I mean, their offense, again, can still put up points with anybody. And, Jared Goff, slow start he had in the beginning, but, he ended up putting together a great performance, 5 touchdown passes, but it just wasn't enough. Josh Allen is the MVP right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens down the stretch here. Right now, I would say the Bills are probably going to get the 2 seed, depending on what happens with the Chiefs, and we'll get into them later in the show. But I think that's what they're going to be locked into. And, it's going to be tough if you're, a wild card team, or, if you're some of these other divisional winners, if you have to go and play Buffalo in that weather. And if you have to play Josh Allen the way he's playing right now, because he's the MVP. And Lamar Jackson, he was solid yesterday. He had 5 touchdown passes against the Giants. But at this point, Josh Allen is the front runner for the MVP. And he continues to build his case up as we move towards the end of the regular season here. Again, another solid performance for him. And like I said, I think the Bills, right now, the 2 seed is where they're going to end up settling, I think, barring a collapse by the Chiefs here, which I don't think is going to happen because they continue to find ways to win. Wasn't pretty yesterday for them against the Browns, but they got the win. And like I said, we'll get into that game later in the show. And the Steelers ended up losing, so that actually helped the Bills. They're not tied now, so we'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys think, though, about this game. What were your takeaways from it? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Steelers and the Eagles, their matchup from yesterday and how that went down. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.